Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Best Practices webinar with NYAPT. Schools are open. Now what? Part 3. So we're not so much focusing on what happened a couple months ago. Now we're really looking forward to where things are today and where we're going forward. Just want to welcome everybody. Happy Thursday. It's hard to believe. It's October is almost over. Not long before we get to the holiday season. We have snow coming, at least in our area. Right, Al? We have snow coming on Friday, I think, right? Yeah. So we might have a snow day. I don't know about that. I just want to thank our panelists today. I want to thank NYAPT for partnering with us. Executive Director David Christopher, just an incredible leader, and what you've done to keep everybody in the loop during these very challenging times, and just really providing a key leadership role. The feedback we've gotten for these webinars have been very positive. We want to continue doing them every other week at 11:30 to 12:30. I just want to say my name is Rick DeRico. I'm the Director of Public Relations here at Transfinder, and we just are continuing to have our Stop Finder app, communication app, that's going to be free for the remainder of the school year. So if anybody's interested in learning more about that tool specifically, just go to our free Stop Finder at transfinder.com, and it's something that districts are using to communicate with their parents, or parents to communicate directly with the district. And it's also something that's being used interdepartmentally. So within the schools, leaders are being able to communicate with each other. Also, I just got to say real quickly that we are running this thing called the Transfinder Cares Act, which is designed to get our Route Finder Plus product in people's hands at the lowest price possible, with the fact that budgets are facing severe crunches, which we're going to be talking about today. So, and these webinars are always recorded, and they're always available on our website, NYAPT. I believe you also have them on your website, correct, Dave? So we will have this. If you go to transfinder.com on our homepage, if you just, you'll see a carousel basically of images, and you'll be able to click right when you see this logo right here of the best practices, go there and you'll see all of our past webinars, as well as white papers, case studies, and other links that are useful. So without further ado, I want to introduce David Christopher, the Executive Director of NYAPT, to introduce our panelists. David.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Transfinder, particularly Tony Santella and you, Rick, for moderating these. These are great informational tools, and we hear a lot of positives from the members who participate in these. And we've got a great panel today. I want to introduce everyone. Rich Gallagher, everybody knows Rich from Bayshore School District. Bill Harvey, Transportation Director Honeoye-Lima School District. And last but not least, Al Valachovic. Did I say it right, Al? From Schenectady, the capital region. I kill his name all the time. I'm sorry. So we've got a great panel of very knowledgeable and veteran transportation directors here to talk about transporting children in the COVID era, and we're talking a little bit about what do we do next beyond the COVID era. So turn it over to Rick to run the panel.
Thanks so much, David. One thing I should make clear is that you as an attendee are very much a part of this event. The questions we get are amazing, and so yes, we have a list of questions we've talked about, and I will tell you we had a riveting conversation literally yesterday that I think will be very useful, but you also may have some questions about it that I will get in front of the panelists as soon as I see them. So just realize that you just type in we can't hear you, but I'm looking at the questions, and as we get them, we will get them in front of the panelists to address whatever questions you have. And then we also follow up with emails if there's questions that didn't get asked in the middle of our discussion here. So please make sure you do that. I'm gonna just start by asking everyone here, starting with Al, Bill, and then Rich, and we all know David, to talk a little bit about just who you are and give us a little bit of a sense of your district, and then we'll get into our none of our questions.
Sure. I'm Al Valachovic. I'm the Transportation Supervisor for Schenectady City School District. I've been here for about 3.5 years. The population for our students is a little over 11,000. We transport non-COVID or pre-COVID between 54 to 5,600 students every day. Now that we're in the COVID culture, we're looking at about 1,500 to 1,700 students every day. So definitely a big difference there. And the one thing that I would just like to add is that through all of this and the changes that we've had and the concerns that I've had, I think that things have kind of rolled out a little bit smooth as of late. So I'm very happy where we're at right now.
Super. Thanks so much, Al. Bill.
Great, thanks. Honeoye-Lima School District is a district-owned and operated fleet of about 50 buses, approximately 2,500 kids. Similar to Al, that number has whittled down here. Maybe we're around, I think, 1,700 or 1,600 being transported currently. And yeah, I've been here with the district for in my 9th year and been in the business for about 35 years. So,
wow,
never seen times like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rich, last but not least.
Rich Gallagher, I'm Director of Transportation and Purchasing Agent for Bay Shore Schools. We have approximately 6,500 students. We're located in Long Island. We're transporting roughly 2/3 of the 6,500 students and preparing to go back to 5 days a week for kindergarten through 5th grade at our elementary schools on Monday, and opening our UPK center on Monday also. So it's been a pretty busy time lately.
That's great. You know, we have a poll question. I was going to try to put it in later, but sometimes it's hard to squeeze it in. So I'm going to start off with this because it does kind of get us talking about budgets early on. So Bridget, by the way, I want to introduce Bridget Moore, who's also running the back end and is critical to this webinar. Bridget, can you put up the poll question about our budget? And just hearing from, and then I'll go to the panelists and ask you to address this. Is budget the #1 issue you're facing in upgrading your routing software? So if you don't mind, I'm just going to start with you, Rich, and then go work our way backwards to Bill and then Al. Just in general, even talking about budgets, what are you facing?
Well, like all New York schools, we've had one state payment cut by 20%. We're not anticipating any budget cut on the next payment because it goes totally to ERS and TRS. But we are anticipating another 20% cut in the next payment after that. In answering this question, I'm not anticipating upgrading any of my routing software because I believe it's been upgraded as far as it can go. I already have Plus and very happy with what I have now.
Great, super. Bill, what's your budget situation in general? And then if you guys have done any upgrades?
You know, right now our budget situation, you know, as Rich said, the state withheld 20% of our aid payment, so that hurts, right? But we're also on the flip side of that, we've had a significant reduction in services with activity runs, sports buses, field trips, things of that nature. So we are saving some money there, but then we're turning around and spending that money having transportation folks out directing traffic and handling things like that. So I'm anticipating, and we are really starting to look hard at budget and what it looks like for next year, and the need, if you will, or maybe even, you know, it's a serious need to hold the line on budget for next year, at least flat if we can, and hopefully reducing maybe a little. As far as the routing software, the budget is not the #1 thing standing in our way of an update. I know that you know, we use Transfinder, and there's a new version of that we're watching closely, excited to get into, but quite honestly, in these trying times, it's a bit much for us to tackle the changeover. So yeah, we're and not to mention the fact that we're being well served with our current Transfinder product.
Super. And Al, what's your situation budget-wise? I know it's been in the paper. Yeah, you're in my backyard, so I've been reading about your significant cuts in teachers and other So what's your situation there?
It is the number one reason why we haven't moved forward. We've had some challenges where we've had significant cuts in staffing, and it's hit all the way into our operational offices, including transportation, where we've had to reduce hours and staff. And my hope is in the near future, when things get back to, I don't want to say normal, but start to get better, that we continue to grow and start to use more products with Transfinder and develop the skills and everything that we have behind us to take it to the next level and deliver a better product for the students.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So let's jump right into the COVID. And David, I'm going to ask you to answer this question as well, more on just how you're doing your job in this COVID environment as well, because things have changed for you, I'm sure. But I'm not going to, anybody can answer this. Feel free to jump in. And the other thing I always like to tell people is this is very much a conversation. So, you know, if Al says something and Bill wants to jump on it or whatever, feel free to just, you know, keep the conversation going. I just want to talk about how have things changed for you and for your transportation office since COVID? I mean, I know it's a broad question, but if there was a quick thing that you would say, well, the number one thing that's really changed for us is fill in the blank.
I would say, the number one thing for us is our routing, right? I mean, how many students we can put on a bus, how we load and unload students, taking temperatures. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's prior to school starting, I was very anxious and concerned. And there was multiple meetings about planning the process out. And what we started to look at is we're trying to make sure that we could go back and do tracing, right? That's where it all started. If we had an issue in the school, how could we start tracing and be accurate with it so we could shut down the proper channels? And it started to go from there. And the first thing that came up is they wanted us to start planning around class delivery. So they wanted us to do busing just for specific classes. And then if you were to take a look at that, and as we started the planning process, we just couldn't do that. We didn't have the assets to do that, and we moved towards a grade level. And then once we moved into the grade level, we saw that we were able to plan better, put the amount of kids on the bus to do the proper distancing, and just make sure that we could get the kids to school safe and sound with the temperature being taken and having all the safety protocols there. One of the biggest things that I ran into, or one of the biggest concerns that I ran into, is the vendors didn't want to do what we call a sick bus, right? So you have kids at school, and you get a call from the nurse, and they're like, "Hey, little Johnny's got a temperature, or little Johnny's got a cough. You know, can you come and pick him up?" Pretty much all the vendors were like, "We really do not want to put our staff in jeopardy with anything like this." And I ended up partnering with one vendor who felt that they could put the pieces in place, from the disinfectant protocol to safe PPE to a process to where they felt we could do that safely, and we did that, and we're knocking it out of the park right now. So some of the things that I think that I've stressed over are starting to really smooth out. Now we're getting done with Q1 and starting to roll into Q2. I think that the planning and the process will continue to get better, and it will be able to run smoother.
That's great. Now, Bill, I want you to answer the question about things changing for you, but I did see you nodding your head about the sick bus. So I don't want you to forget that. So you can talk about the sick bus, but also just in general, how things have changed for you and your office.
Well, I think the biggest changes for us, and they've been significant in our office, it's because of the way we're handling arrival and dismissal. And dismissal is always the busier time of day, but it is very, very quiet. And I think it's because things are spaced out. It's just like profound, the difference in the office environment during dismissal. And there's less phone calls and less, it's just very calm, it's very controlled, it's less, just the volume is significantly reduced. And I think it's because of the way we're set up and the way everything's spaced out, from parent pickup to bus pickup to, you know, getting there to drop the kids off. So that piece of it, that's been a profound difference, is a calmer office. On the flip side of that, probably the most profound difference is, I'll call it COVID anxiety. we've had a lot of kids, and we're having a little bit of a, in our area and in our district, we're having a little bit of a spike of hot spots. And we haven't had anybody, sick in our department, but we have kids that all of a sudden, the drivers find out they're not going to be in for 2 weeks. Well, then they're very anxious. Like, do they have COVID? Well, we don't know. Or if they're out because they're quarantined, we've got several kids out quarantined. So trying to set people at ease, make sure they know that if the health department hasn't contacted them, that they were not exposed, how this reinforces the importance of wearing our masks, hand washing, disinfecting. But we spend far more time on that than I anticipated. And I must say the office staff, the girls are doing a great job of keeping everybody de-escalated and in their happy place as best we can.
And you also mentioned yesterday, Brent, you had to play traffic cop. That's a unique situation that you wouldn't have had to do pre.
Yeah, that's, we have some sports trips started back in, and I had to tell the athletic director, you don't get any sports buses until all the kids have left school, because your sports bus drivers are my traffic cops, and I can't operate without them. I don't have any, but we have to have them. So. But at the same time, if one of those guys is off or several of them are off, then I'm dipping into the facilities maintenance. I've had building mechanics out there, myself, my bus mechanics. So directing traffic is a whole nother, and everything's going great with it. But God help us if somebody's not standing there to direct it, because we will have a mess. It's a critical role, just like driving the bus.
Absolutely. And what about, you talked about the sick bus. Did you have thoughts on that as well?
We had the same thing where we had to say, okay, who's going to be willing to, you talk about COVID anxiety and who's going to take kids home if it happens. And when I talked to the administration and the principals, they said, well, that's a parent's responsibility. And I said, yes, it is. But we all know that's not going to happen. Some parents, like their husband's out of town, or, dad's, in Buffalo, and the child needs to go home right now. Mom doesn't have a car. And they're like, oh, God, we hadn't thought of that. So, we had to put together a team. We asked for volunteers who'd be willing to do that, what bus we would use, and that bus, put the process together, and have the correct PPE and disinfecting processes. So we went through the same thing that Al did, and we've had to do it a couple times and without incident. But, not everybody wants to do that. So you have to kind of have a team that you go to for that specific task.
Dave, I'm going to skip over you. I'll come back to you at the end. I want to stick with the transportation directors first. And Rich, how have things changed for you in this COVID environment?
Biggest change I've seen is because we were on hybrid for all the grades, and now that we're starting to switch and bring more kids back, which was our ultimate goal, we're seeing a lot of students being changed from remote back into school, or from hybrid to something else. Just a lot of switching of programs that they're assigned to. So the routing and keeping up with all those changes has been the biggest change. I will say we don't have a medical bus here. It was decided from the beginning that if somebody who was sick in school, they would stay in the isolation room until the parents could get here to take them home. We're a smaller district area-wise than Bill or Al, so most of the parents can get here and get their children home. It's not
sounds like the name of the, it sounds like, Al, I remember you were in one of our first panels, and well, I think all of you were. And the word flexible was the name of the game back then. It sounds like nothing's changed in that area. It's still got to be very flexible that things are going to change, right?
Absolutely.
So Dave, how about you? I mean, running NYAPT, I mean, and all the things that you're doing to help equip all these transportation departments. How has things changed for you? How have things changed?
Well, I think one of the, I chuckled to myself when I heard Al talk about the sick bus, because one of the things that we've done is these webinars and chapter webinars and you know, we've run numerous webinars and attended. I can't tell you how many chapter meetings I've been part of. But way back in May or maybe April, the issue of sick bus came up at one of the chapter meetings, and you know, we've talked about that a couple times in a couple webinars. Not something you'd really think about unless you know, were networking with your neighbors and talking this stuff over with other professionals until it happened, right? All of a sudden, wow, now I've got students got to go home, because we all say, I'm sure the administrators all say, well, it's a parent responsibility, but the reality is that it doesn't happen. You know, parents not home, how do we get them home? So one of the things we've done as an association is participate in these webinars, other kinds of webinars that we've run, and chapter meetings. I've been on more webinars and chapter meetings and seen more people than I've ever done in the past, aside from state conference time, which is a good thing, because you learn a lot from each other. I mean, I'm writing stuff down as you guys all talk. It helps us in our advocacy work. I just did a 1-hour presentation to the School Boards Association annual meeting, and many of the things I talked about are all things that we've talked about on these webinars. So these are very valuable, I feel. You know, of course, our state conference was canceled this summer, which was just, never happened before, right? We're planning for a virtual winter workshop in February. That's a new thing as well. So, you know, it's just communicate. Find ways to reach out and stay in the loop, and provide opportunities for people to communicate through these webinars, through news and notes, which we put out every 2 weeks. I would tell you we're very busy trying to keep up with all of the communication processes, along with all the other things. You know, the advocacy work is more difficult because the legislators are difficult to reach, right? Because they're, you know, you can't walk into the LOB anymore and just have a conversation. You've got to do it via webinar or whatever. So you know, it's going on, but it's more difficult in that regard. So I think we've done a pretty good job communicating and providing opportunity to communicate, but you know, always looking for ways to get better at it.
That's great. Yeah, our CEO, Antonio Savitella, talks about how in some ways he's more efficient, and in some ways we as a company are more efficient than ever before. He can talking to more people. You know, I think the comfort level with Zoom, obviously what you do is tangible. You got to move people. So you don't have the luxury, but I think there is things that we can do communication wise that can be more efficient than ever. Bridget, can you pull up the poll results and tell us a little bit about what we heard from the attendees?
Yes, so it looks like budget was 56% of those who voted was the #1 issue that they're facing, and 44% did not.
Okay, good. Well, it's a little more positive than I thought. I mean, I thought it would have been almost, you know, in the 90%. So that's good. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about something we discussed yesterday, and then a bunch of other questions. But this is the one I think that people might be, you know, I might be piqued by. Al, yesterday we talked about this idea of an outbreak that may happen at a school, and that may impact like drivers, correct? And being short drivers as a result of coronavirus, and coming up with ways to work with multiple vendors to address the your shortage of drivers.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about this idea, that what you're doing, and then we're bringing everybody else to talk about how they may be able to adapt this idea to their own district, because obviously Schenectady is unique. You have 7 vendors you work with, but tell us a little bit about that plan.
So before I get into the plan, I would tell you that the shortage of drivers has always been an issue for us, right, in our industry. And over the last couple of years, I've tried to push our vendors into a partnership with each other to provide a better customer service. And I think, if you know, with everybody who has backgrounds with dealing with vendors and the bidding process and how that all works, it's very competitive, right? And nobody wants to give up any business or wants to show weakness in an area where somebody else can jump on or or take advantage of. So this has been a couple years in the making of developing relationships, being proactive, and then having something as unfortunate as COVID hit us. And when this happened a couple months back, where we're trying to figure all this stuff out, I started having conference calls, not just with specific vendors, but more of having all of them on the call and engaging them as a team for Schenectady as a whole. And the conversations started to develop, the partnerships, they started to call one another and engaging in conversation. And I started to see the strength and the benefit of what we were doing. They were also discussing, turnover, whether if a driver was going from one vendor to another, discussing information from that perspective as well. So what we ended up developing out of this partnership is, in the COVID environment now, where we have issues where somebody may have been affected by COVID, but it's not confirmed, and we do maybe a 2-week sit out where that driver's out, and that has an impact on that vendor. What will happen is that vendor will now call up the other vendor and ask them to temporarily cover that run for them to ensure that customer service is there. Keep in mind that all of our vendors are on our roster. All of their drivers are on our roster, right? So there's nothing going on there that's out of the norm. So that's good. And the other piece is that all of our vendors have access to Transfinder. So if one vendor was to have an issue, could be one route, 2 routes, or have multiple callouts. For example, we had 5 callouts today. One of the vendors actually called another vendor at 5:30 this morning and gave up 2 routes for the day and just said, hey, can you cover this? The vendor pulls it up on their Transfinder, takes a look at it, knows who the students are, knows where the stops are. They review it with the driver, and off they go on the run. I actually got a call on one of those routes today, and it went perfectly. It went perfect. I checked the GPS. The times were all within, acceptable limits. So it wasn't as if we had a customer service issue with a student, and it worked out fine. So I would like us to continue that process and to continue, building those relationships, because I think that we can even grow further from there. But I think it's helped us in our current environment right now, just trying to think outside of the box and to build those partnerships and to keep a close eye on them and make sure that they're working properly for the district.
And Bill, I'm going to go to you in a second, because I know you have a twist on this as well. Al, you also had to change how you do things, right? Like in the past, you would want to be the one that's kind of the intermediary between those interactions, right? But now you're like, it's okay, just keep me in the loop. I need to be knowing what's going on. But you encourage, right, that interaction outside.
Right. Absolutely. And the way that I look at it is, it's kind of like your own employees, right? You give them autonomy, they start to grow and develop, they get stronger, and then they take off, right? So I'm looking at this as the same thing. So I'm keeping a close eye on it now. I'm watching the process, and I'm seeing it start to grow and take off, giving them a little bit of autonomy. I'm stepping back. They're taking the ball and running with it, and I'm seeing it start to take off. So I'm very pleased where we're at, and I'm really anxious to see where this is going to go.
That's awesome. Bill, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're doing the same thing with our, within our department. For big bus substitute drivers, we have 2, and you're looking at one of them. So, I pose the question to my team here in the office and in the shop. At what point if I call the superintendent and say we're going to have to go virtual, I'm short of staff, and he'll say how many people are out, and I'll be like 3. So, at what point do we call it, and then how do we figure out on any given day? I don't want to be facing that, as we often do at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd rather have like a resources game plan for each day of the week. And then we have some people that could drive a van, but they can't drive a big bus. But I got some people that are driving vans that could drive a big bus. And then I got people driving big buses that have the skill set that they could jump on and drive somebody else's big bus, if you're sticking with me. So I'm looking at, it would be a major shift, like in order to, maybe I can get so I'm 6 or 7 deep before I have to make a call. So we've never had to do this. And the interesting thing is that 5 days a week, our schedules are different. We have multiple out of district schools that some are going Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Other ones are going Mondays and Thursdays. Other ones are going Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it's crazy. But what that does was it leaves me with a little bit of resource with respect to drivers on every day, but it's different every day. So we take a big whiteboard in the dispatch office and break it down for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What are our resources on those days? That's where we go first. You follow me? So it's thinking in a way that, you know, like Al said, we've all been short on drivers for a long time. So we're used to, you know, pulling a rabbit out of the hat. We're good at it, quite frankly. But this is a little bit different because we may have to go deeper and for a longer period of time. Somebody, or if we have a couple people that get quarantined for 14 days, you know, that's going to be a situation. So shame on us if we don't prepare for that. And we really I hadn't thought about this until the last, you know, 3 weeks or a month. I've been running this through my head and delivered it to the team, and the team has started to pull that together. So and that may be something we talk about, things we take out of this pandemic and carry forward in the future. I'm looking at this going, this is a plan that we should have every day, you know, on a quote unquote normal year. So that's what we're doing, thinking the same way that Al is, you know, how do we cover that?
Al, you had mentioned something yesterday about your previous experience prior to going to Schenectady, about even the possibility of housing, bringing in outside drivers or something,
Right.
and housing them. Can you talk a little bit about that as well? And then I want to go to Rich and get your input on that, Rich.
I also have 10 years of tractor trailer experience as an operations manager. And I had pretty much the whole Northeast area. And it ranged from accounts that had 200 drivers at one location down all the way to 5 drivers at account. So some things that we used to use is if we had issues where we had capacity problems, maybe capacity went up, or we had issues with drivers where we had to unfortunately do some termination or had to make some adjustments. What we would do is we would move our resources, right? So we would temporarily bring in drivers from different locations, and we would house them and bring in the equipment to cover those areas that needed that support. It was temporary, and again, it was all voluntary from the driver perspective and who wanted to help out. And believe it or not, people love to assist. They love to come from different areas to help and to become a team and to become something bigger than just their location. And it's something that when we were talking about it yesterday, it kind of just, you know, came to my head. I'm like, hey, could we do that here? Well, what if we had an issue with a district where we, you know, they were, you know, they had half of their fleet, you know, affected by COVID. Is it possible that we could relocate maybe a different location that may have closed down or something had occurred within the state where we could, and again, we're thinking outside of the box, right? We're not saying that this is something that we could just implement right away, but is this forward thinking that we can use to say we could move some resources into those locations to help the students out in the area? It's almost, think about it too. Almost think about it like an unfortunate situation in the city where, you know, think 9/11. Everybody came from all over the place to help out that location. They were from all over the country. The same thing.
You think about like a power outage and National Grid, but people are coming from Canada, they're coming from Syracuse, they're coming from all over to cover.
Absolutely. And I think what we could do is, you know, is forward think with this, think outside the box, and what can we do, and reach out to other districts and get the Dave Christophers involved and see what he can help do to, you know, engage the state in conversation, maybe on, you know, taking some rules and regulations and maybe giving us additional support to be able to do something like this where one school district is helping another, and we're able to come together in a different capacity. And I think that that's where we need to start going with stuff like this, especially with COVID.
So Rich, you talked about different, thank you, Al. So you talked about budget crunches, and is this, with this type of argument, would this have legs if you went before the school board and tried to get some additional funding, either for the software that would work with other districts that maybe don't use the same software, or just to cover the various costs that may be more than what you normally have in your transportation budget to get these outside drivers in, or other vendors?
Well, I would think you would want to go to the board with it, because it's a way to, even if they don't have the ability to say yes now, it plants the seed for the future. Because the way we handle it here is, most people know I have a contractor. The contractor is a fairly big contractor, and he also does the public transportation system. He had the ADA transportation and the what we call blue buses or county buses. So he has those drivers, and he uses them on overtime to do the schoolwork when he needs additional drivers. So he has another pool of drivers that he can pull in to do schoolwork, because he keeps them all qualified for school as much as possible. Additionally, they kind of talk to each other, the contractors down here, and they'll pick up a route for each other. They make arrangements between themselves, and they pay each other, or however they want to do it, but it's an arrangement between the contractors. It allows them to transfer the information. I agree that it helps when the routing software is the same, but there are always other ways of transferring the routes to the other person. I mean, we can go back to fax machines if we have to. You can scan them and email them over, use the software. The big thing is to cooperate and try and get everything done, keep the kids safe.
So Dave, if somebody's watching this and they love it, but they're saying, I don't even know where to begin, do you have some ideas? And anybody else can jump in. Al, I know you had some thoughts yesterday, and Bill, I'm sure you do as well, and Rich. But Dave, where would you start to build this kind of backup?
Well, I think a lot of the public school districts are doing this somewhat informally, where they talk to their neighbor and, can you help me out with a sports run or this run? It's not so much, in the COVID environment, but, in a normal environment. In the COVID environment, obviously, you could still reach out to your neighbor or a local contractor to put them on, a standby, if you will, if they have the resources to do it. One of the issues we're facing is everyone's a little short, but if there's somebody out there that might have a spare person or two, certainly those in the public sector, they would be, intermunicipal agreements. You'd want to make sure that you've got that, put together, so that if you want to do it properly, again, there's a lot of informal stuff going on out there already that, that they haven't done those formal agreements. In the private side, I just wrote down is that in your contract, do you have the ability to allow your contractor to subcontract? That might be that simple. Just in your bid, can your contractor subcontract with other contractors with your approval, obviously? So you might want to look at that in your bid specs. One of the things, and as I listen to this, to Al's point, needs to be done is a discussion, at the state level, to try to loosen up some of the regulation on this, because when you start cross contracting, there's some hoops you have to jump through that are not that easy to do on the fly. It would be appropriate to be able to set those things up ahead of time, so that if these things happen, this is what I need to do. Like, similar to what we talked about yesterday with emergency contracts. And I wrote down a few thoughts here to discuss, and we've got our legislative chair right over here as well, Bill Harvey, so we can chew on some of this stuff, because I think the ability to put these things in place on the fly is what we need to do as things present themselves. And this is one of those things that will go beyond the COVID era, right? We're probably going to be dealing with driver shortages forever. because the whole industry has changed. And, with the more stringent federal regulation and other things that we're dealing with. So this might be a good conversation to have to solve that driver, to mitigate that driver problem going forward.
So Al and Bill, since you both are doing this in different ways, so someone again watching this saying, okay, I have informal things, but I haven't really done a real hardcore plan. Where do you begin? Either one of you, go ahead, jump in.
Relationship building. You got to build relationships. You've got to get people to let their guards down. When you work with contractors, they're in this to make money, right? And what you need to do is to develop a relationship with them, get them to let their guard down and to say, we need to do what's best for the school district. And what you become is more of a communicator and a leader or a coach through that group. And you kind of foster that behavior. And you do it in a way that's slow. You don't just jump in it and tell them what to do. You show them how this would work for them. You ask them to get involved in this decision making, and you get their buy-in. And it's taken me a while to make this work. And it's something that I envisioned years ago when I started, and to see it working, it's a great accomplishment for the district. And I think that, when you build that trust, you work with those vendors closely, you let even the drivers know how much you care about them. And they all want to work together. And that's where I would start, is the fostering of relationships and building good partnerships with everybody.
Great. Bill, you want to jump on?
Yeah, I think, within the district operation, the place to start is the step one for me was to change mindsets a little bit. Because, there's that old saying that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got, right? So it's, we have a way that we do it, and that's just how we do it. But we have to explain, like to sit down and walk my team through it a little bit, like have a list, have a seniority list of all my drivers. I say, I'm going to go down this list. And when I get to a name that you guys say that driver could do any route, they're not easily rattled, right? So we went down through and went through that exercise. So I go, here you got 5 people that at a moment's notice, we feel like they're the type of employee and personality that we could pull them in and say, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Go do Rick's run. Al's going to do your run. I'm going to do Al's run. And that whole thing would work, right? So it's changing the mindset and recognizing how the pieces would move. And we're at the point now, the next step is to actually go to those people and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, you've been identified as somebody that would be suitable to this type of thing. Would you be willing to help us? Because if I have, 10 people that we've identified, maybe only 7 of them are going to be willing to do it. So you want buy-in. I think that's where we're at now, is starting to lay the plan out and then make sure that all the parties have buy-in and they all understand, why we would do this and how it would work. And we get in our comfort zone, right? And we don't want to step out of it. And when I say we, I mean me, my head drivers, dispatchers, and bus drivers, right? That's my route. I don't know what Al does. I don't want to go drive Al's route. Well, just so you know, there's 3 routes that you might be called to do, and I want you to look them over, and I'll even pay you to go dry run them, right, to give you a little prep. So that's where we're at, is changing mindsets, bringing people in, letting them know we can't always do what we've always done.
That's great. I've been reading this book called Start With Why. I don't know if you guys ever read it, but it talks about really painting the picture of purpose, what your purpose is. And it tells us one story. Tony wrote it in a note the other day too. You had these 2 bricklayers, and the first one's asked, like, how's your job going? And he's going, well, it's hot, it's backbreaking. I don't know if I'm ever even going to see this thing come to completion in my lifetime. And he goes down another pace to another bricklayer, and first thing he says is, I'm building a cathedral. And then he says, it's backbreaking, it's really hot, I'm not sure I'm ever going to see this thing again, but we're building a cathedral. I'm building a cathedral. And the idea of letting drivers know, like, you have a crucial role in these kids' education and safety. And you know what? You're a utility player. And I always thought, sometimes, I want to be the best third base. I was a catcher, so I want to be the best catcher. But you know what? think about the utility players that were so critical that could play. You could put them almost anywhere, and they were your go-to guys, you know. So that idea of just purpose and realizing that, and it's hard because I can be territorial. We can all be territorial. I don't know about you guys, but as a reporter, I was kind of territorial. But you know what? When you start seeing the bigger picture, I think sometimes the territorial stuff can kind of fall by the wayside. Sorry for preaching at you guys, but it just made me think of that when you talked about that. Rich, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I agree with Al. You have to build a team to get everything to start working. But there's nothing that stops you from looking at all the regulations and making a list of what you can do ahead of time. I was just sitting here listening, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I could get an insurance certificate and have that on file, have emergency contracts set up, so all I have to do is have them signed, have them agreed to by the board in advance. There are a lot of things that you could do and put in a file folder and just have it ready to go when the need arises.
That's great. Yeah, that's why it'd be nice to have a checklist to say, if you're going to just sometimes when you hear something like this, you like, some people may be motivated right away to just say, okay, what's my first step? So that's a helpful one, Rich. And that's something, Dave, I don't know if you guys could put together something that even has like, here's that emergency, Al, you talked about that emergency, what'd you call it, an emergency agreement? Or
It was an emergency contract.
yeah. So that's great. Okay, we move on. Anything else you want to add? I just wanted to touch on that.
I just want to add one thing before we move on in terms of, I want to expand on Al's comment about relationships and something Bill Harvey said a while back. A lot of these things that we're talking about, your average superintendent or board of education may not be that up to school on because they don't deal with it like we do. So you've got to establish that trust and that relationship with your board and your superintendent as well. Because when you go to them and say, hey, I want to put this in place, this in place, and this in place because I might use it, they've got to have trust that you're going to do the right thing. So, you know, I think Bill made a comment a few webinars ago about, you know, he had a lot of trust in the bank with his superintendent so he can do certain things. You got to build those relationships with your administrative team so that you can make these bold moves without hindrance.
That's good. That's very good. Dave, I want to go to a question that you posed when we talked about today's webinar, and I want you to jump off, if you don't mind starting, about this idea of how to keep drivers safe. Basically, you made a reference to the North Syracuse incident. I was wondering if you could give us some detail about that, and then, you know, give us your thoughts, and then we'll get other people to jump in on keeping drivers safe.
Yeah, that was an issue where you know, some drivers innocently band together and, you know, in a group, and it turned out that one of them was apparently COVID positive, and then that quarantined a group of drivers. Same things happened out here in the Capital Regional and other school district. I think that's a training issue. I think we need to continually work with our staff to remind them that, you know, this COVID threat is still among us. We need to use PPE. We need to social distance. We need to wash our hands. We need to do all the things, you know, not travel to out of other states. We need to do all those things that are necessary to stay safe. And I think we use the fact that you're in a essential service, transporting our most precious cargo, our future, and it's bigger than delivering mail. You know, the job you're doing is very important. We can't spare you for a day. So protect yourself, protect your family, protect the kids. And I think that's a continual training issue. And I think, you know, this webinar, the format that we use, I mean, Bill, you talked about that in the spring when you were meeting with your drivers on a regular basis, having webinars with them and talking with them about different things. It's very easy to reach out. And I think for the most part, drivers will embrace that. You know, certainly you're not going to, you know, hold a webinar and, you know, chew them out. You're going to get on there and talk about, you know, current events and remember, you know,
right.
social distance, wear your mask. We've had some instances where schools have had to close down and protect yourself. And, and here are 2 or 3 other things we're doing as a district to try to help you out. So I think that's an awareness issue and a training issue.
Yeah. Super. Thank you. Bill, you want to talk a little bit about what you've done with your drivers?
Yeah, we, the training we've done, we had training with them on how to properly, clean the bus, use PPE. I'm sure many of the folks that are listening and Al and Rich have done the same, but then we broke into training groups so I could have smaller groups. So we have the staff split in quarters. And when I do online, I do Zoom calls with them. I call them Zoom town halls. And we're able to share the screen and have specific training. And the benefit of that is that, it's a smaller group. So it seems a little more intimate with respect to being able to see eye contact, make sure their engagement, if somebody's leaning in, has something to share, it's easier to pick up on that. So, and then the email thing, I mean, my staff, they had a fit when we started emailing them their pay stubs 3 years ago. Yeah. And then they would come in and we had to print their pay stub for them, log in and get it. Well, by April last year, we had the entire staff, the entire workforce proficient in email. And that's a standard of communication now. I needed something from everybody yesterday, and I fired off an email at 11:30, and they got it. It worked. 8 months ago, that wouldn't have happened.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's a matter of accepting where we're at or challenging the team to move forward and grow. And we've done that with the technology and use that. It's a great communication tool. And we do now that I have everybody on email, it's real easy to grab a link out of an article in a trade magazine about something that happened at North Syracuse or somewhere else and email it out to everybody and say, hey, just FYI, here's an interesting story. This is a good reason to remember why it's important to wear our mask and social distance and hand wash and keep the bus clean, et cetera. So it changes everything when you have that level of connectivity.
Great.
Which will probably always stay with us after this COVID era ends, I hope.
I think so. I think that we've talked about it in our office. We're talking with our marketing team about even like this idea of hybrid. Nothing, in person is still very valuable. I mean, we all still need that, right? But there's this hybrid that sometimes, Dave, you've mentioned before, your attendance at board meetings is through the roof now because you can just hop on and you can, and if so I think that how it felt different doing face-to-face calls. Now that's so old. We're all so used to it, So here's kind of like one of those crazy wish list questions. Like if money were no object, which we always know was never going to be the case. But if money was no object, what is it that your team, you would like to have in your operation? And I'm going to start with Rich and then Al and Bill. What's on your wish list?
Well, my wish list would include maybe getting my contractor to be on the same software I'm on. I think that'll happen with the newest version. I don't know. I've got a pretty good contractor. They take care of a lot of stuff for us. I guess okay. I'd like to also have some stability for a little bit in the way the routes are done, so that we can get everything cleaned up. I guess I've missed that free time that you usually get in October to go back and check your routes, make sure you got all the kids out that belong out, make sure everybody's where they belong. That cleanup time has been missed this year. I guess that's where I'm at.
More time, I think, is on everybody's list. That's a good one, Rich. Bill, I saw you shaking your head. What's on your list there?
Yeah, I was just echoing Rich's comments. And normally we have this, like you get into routine, and then in October we're going back and cleaning up and tidying up and redoing the routes. So yeah, I feel your pain there, Rich. I think on my wish list would be live internet, like the bus would be a hotspot, and that would allow me to have accountability is something that I would really like to have with respect to student accountability. We take attendance. We've always done that here on our PM runs, but now we're doing it on every run, every day. And I would love to be able to have the kids get on and swipe in, and I would know they were on, and have live GPS, that type. So, you know, taking the technology to that next level with student accountability and live GPS for the buses, and having the buses be, I don't know what's the term there, mobile hotspot, so the kids could have connectivity while on board. That's kind of where I'd be going technology wise.
That's great. Al?
I actually have two.
Good.
One is the big one for me, and that's for our vendors. And what I would want to do is to provide a cleaning service for their buses for disinfectant. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is the drivers and the monitors do enough. And I think now we're adding another piece to it where they're now maintaining the cleanliness of their bus and everything that else is going on in there. And I want them to focus on the driving and taking care of the students. And if I could, I would love to support or to pay for a professional cleaning that goes in there every night and does the disinfectant. Currently, what we do is we have our vendors go through with an actual disinfectant gun at the end of the day. The drivers go through and disinfect it at the end of the day, and then in between each run, they're doing their wipe downs and cleaning it for disinfectant. If there was a way that I could remove that from them and give them that value add of the cleaning, I think it would help with morale and would just show that we care about them a little bit more. So that would be the one piece. The other piece for me would be on the technology side. And if it would be possible, is to have, like, for example, when I come into the district, when I swipe in, there's a temperature taker mounted right outside the door where I come in and my forehead hits it and it says 97.2. If there's something that we could do to mount that on the outside of a bus, and then on the inside just have a green or a red for the driver to see that and to know that there may be an issue going on in the moment, and being able to use that as a tool, I think that would be huge. That would be on my wish list as well.
So actually taking the kids' temperatures as they're coming in.
Yes.
Wow, okay. So I thought some districts were trying to get away and having it be more parental responsibility, or at the school, they didn't want to be, but you think just for them to know it?
Just for them to be aware of it, I think it would be a big win for us.
Okay.
Rick, we've actually gone to a machine that goes in the doorway. So when the kids come through the doorway, they hold up their wrist and it measures their temperature. So
that's
we're
on the
not
bus?
doing the. No, it's in the buildings.
In the building?
It's mounted into the doorway of the building, and it takes their temperature as they walk past, and it's almost an instantaneous temperature check.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we're getting away from the individual temperature check machines.
Wow, that's great. We're actually running out of time. I'm going to ask everyone to just share maybe one takeaway, and I'll close with Dave. This is, again, an idea that they just listen to this, but the one thing you don't want them to miss is this key point. I'm going to actually start back with you, Al, and I'll go to Bill and Rich, and then we'll end with Dave, and I'll just close this out. What's one thing that you want to make sure people who were listening today would take back to their office, or maybe to their school board or superintendent?
To build relationships, not just relationships like David pointed out with just the vendors or your drivers, but also with the superintendent and the board of ed. I think that relationship building will take you to the next level and will allow you to remove any barriers for your forward thinking to make things happen down the road.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Al. Bill.
Excellent advice, Al. I would say to make sure you're pivoting and starting to focus less on where we've been and how we did and where you are and how you're doing, and looking forward. And that's what I'm trying to do now. Look forward to budget, to winter weather, how that changes our cleaning routines. There's a lot of things that are going to be changing for us. And just take the time to look ahead. And that includes, you know, contingency planning for an emergency plan like Al and I have talked about here for staffing.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that, Bill. That's a great point, and that's what we want all these to be, is very forward-looking as well. So if you have any suggestions for any questions, any topic areas, those are the attendees who are on, please, when you get a survey response to today's survey, just reply and give your thoughts, because we, you know, that's very helpful, Bill. Just, you know, so many questions we didn't even get to. One was, you know, just about adjusting your budgets and, you know, right, what does the future look like for transportation? So thank you, Bill. Takeaway, Rich, from you.
I guess the biggest one I have is to prepare for the future, with making sure you get everything lined up in case you do need service from somebody else, and to make those arrangements and try and think of everything you're going to need to enter into another contract at the last minute. There's so many things between DOT and SED and DMV that you have to work on to get those all listed so you know where you're at. You don't want to be thinking about those when it happens. You want to have them listed so you can just go down the list.
That's great. That's super. David?
You always make me go last, and I got to come up with some kind of a brilliant thing to say after these professionals have already laid out all the groundwork. But I'll try to come up with something.
You always do.
So I think that, again, the future is what we need to be focusing on here, because I question how much of these things that we have adopted during the COVID era are going to move into the future, and how much school transportation is going to change. I'm very concerned because budgets are going to be tight for many years to come. You know, the threat of perhaps other pandemics are always going to be with our generation, right? I mean, we lived through this, no other generation has since the early 1900s. So I think we need to be thinking about how to, you know, future-proof our industry, the school bus transportation industry, in the whole. You know, what can we do with regulation? What can we do as partners to do these kinds of webinar interactions, or, you know, conventions, workshops, whatever, to learn from each other, because it's a very unique business. You know, we're not going to go anywhere else to talk about this stuff other than within, you know, our own industry. So I think, again, to the plan for the future and start thinking about how is this industry going to change and what it's going to look like 5 years, 10 years down the road, when you know, we start to settle back in again. And I got to say this, I was going to say this earlier, but I don't want to interrupt these guys because they had great points. Bill made a great point about we're a very conservative industry. You know, we're set in our ways because what we've done works. And kids are not, you know, hurt and injured and killed on school buses because we're set in our ways. And we can't forget about those ways of providing great, safe transportation. But we have to think about how do we do this going forward, because it's going to change. And if we don't dictate that change, if we don't guide that change, it will be dictated to us. So
that's good. Bill, what did you say? If you always do what you've always done.
There you go.
If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got.
Very good. That's a good takeaway right there. I want to thank our panelists again, Bill, Al, Rich, of course, Dave, for your leadership. I want to remind anybody on this that if you have any story of things that you have done, any novel approaches that worked for you, that we could share. You don't have to be, you know, a Transfinder client. Just, we want to hear any story. We put them on our best practices page. Just email mystory@transfinder.com, and you may be reached out to be on a future webinar. And I also want to just highlight that our next webinar, we do these every other week. So November 12th, I can't believe we're talking November. So November 12th at 11:30 a.m. And until then, I hope you all have a great day, and thanks again.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks
for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hold on.